Game Boy, 1993. Here's just a few games that came out in 93 for the classic Game Boy, the DMG, including Alien 3. Now, the other Alien 3 games I thought were pretty decent. This one is completely different than the NES one or the Super Nintendo one if you played that one. This one's more of a top-down, not really Metroidvania, but it's more of an exploration, like a maze style. You have to go through and you can pick up weapons, you can pick up key cards that'll open up different doors to get you where you need to go. If you love the Alien franchise and maybe you skipped this one because you already had it for NES or Super Nintendo or something like that, and again, those were fun too, but this one is a different Alien 3 game than those ones. It's its own deal. It might be worth checking out. Race Driving might be worth not checking out, but let's look at it anyway. Now, Race Driving, ambitious to put it on a Game Boy, of all things, and away we go. Well, I mean, for Game Boy, this actually isn't terrible, right? I mean, it's still not as good as it could be. There was a proposed race driving game that was going to be a Tengen kart for NES. Never came out. The prototype was released. The prototype is out there. Spot the Cool Adventure. Well, yeah, back when 7-Up, the Spot character, had its own franchise, its own video games, its own shirt. A lot of things going on for the 7-Up Spot, which was a kind of mascot character for 7-Up at the time. This one plays just like an action platformer. It's another one of those. You pick up the blocks to toss them. That is your kind of primary weapon in this game. And if you're a huge fan of the NES and you're looking at this game and you're like, it looks a little familiar. It's kind of like that McDonald's game, that Mick Kids. Is it MC Kids? Well, there's a dot there, but I think it's just called Mick Kids. You know what I'm talking about? You'd be semi-right. This game in I think it's in the Europe? I think this game in the UK was a McDonald's themed game. But when it came out in the US, they used it as a 7-Up mascot game. That's interesting. Either way, it's just a typical platformer, a little stiff on the controls, but, you know, it could be worth checking out. We got a Top Gun game, Guts and Glory. All right, let's have a look. So as you leave, you go on your mission. It's one of these kind of games. It's like, you know, like in the cockpit, spinning around, trying to shoot down the other guy. I got myself all twisted around. Never mind. Zen Intergalactic Ninja, a hidden gem for sure on the NES, one of those late release games. Also came out for the Game Boy version, different than the NES version, but it's still a very good Game Boy game. If you're looking for great action platformer style Game Boy action games from Konami, so you get an amazing soundtrack, you get great graphics for Game Boy standards, you're going to find that with Zen Intergalactic Ninja. Might be worth checking out. To make it even more confusing, this is Hudson Adventure Island 2, which we would know as Adventure Island 3 on the NES. You see, we never got the first one on the Game Boy. It did come out in Japan, though. And then our Adventure Island 2 was just the regular Adventure Island on Game Boy. And then our Adventure Island 3 for the NES was Adventure Island 2 on the Game Boy. If you're confused, so am I. But anyway, when it says Adventure Island 2 on the Game Boy, know that it's the Adventure Island 3, or a port of it anyway, for the the NES version of Adventure Island 3 for the Game Boy. Yeah, never mind. More ports to be had. We had Darkwing Duck on the classic Game Boy. This one plays like that NES version, which is lovely to see. Good to have these. Capcom usually did a pretty good job porting their kind of Capcom games to the Game Boy. The Mega Man games were pretty cool. The Disney versions of their games, like the DuckTales, turned out pretty well. And Darkwing Duck was always a favorite for a lot of people for the Capcom Disney crossover. The cartoon was amazing. And this one plays, I mean, I hate to say it, but because this game plays the most like Mega Man and Mega Man rules, I think a lot of people gravitate towards this game, which I don't doubt at all. It's a great game. Lovely to see Darkwing Duck on the Game Boy. Little Mermaid also came out for the Game Boy, and it plays like the NES Little Mermaid game, but a Game Boy version. So, very neat. Interesting that we had, like, Darkwing Duck, Little Mermaid, we had DuckTales, DuckTales 2, but we never got Rescue Rangers on the Game Boy. Interesting. The Flintstones King Rock Adventure Island. This is a great game. This is, I mean, the Flintstones games, most people know, like, especially the Surprise at Dinosaur Peak for its value, but both Flintstones games on the NES are fantastic, and the one on the Game Boy is also fantastic, this one here anyway. Interesting gameplay style. You have your little axes that you throw, and it can stun enemies in air, so you can use them to jump on them to reach higher platforms. That's an interesting mechanic with this game. And I'm not complaining, it's just kind of a cool thing to have in this game. But it's another very good platformer if you're looking for something new that maybe you haven't checked out yet. Might be worth looking for. Kid Dracula, well, this is that kind of chibi action version of Castlevania that did come out for the Famicom, but we never got it for the NES in the United States. It's unfortunate. If we did, it would have been a favorite for so many people. I think it was just because it was a later release game that, you know, whatever. But we did get it for the Game Boy, and that's good news. So you play as like this kind of Kid Dracula, so to speak. I loved the fact that this first stage is basically the entire game of Castlevania 1. It's the entire Dracula's castle. But you can shoot, you can also charge up your shot. When you do that, they'll drop a coin, which you use later for, you know, trying to get like extra lives and stuff. You make your way through. You also have the chance to, instead of charging up your shot, you can turn into a bat, which might save you here and there. Worth at least playing, by whatever means you need to play your Game Boy games. Oh, I hate saying this game out loud because it's always wrong. Is it Milon's Secret Castle? I called it Milon's Secret Castle for a long time, but I don't think it's Milon. I think that's a country. Let's call it Milon's Secret Castle. How about that? This is a Game Boy port of the game that came out several years before this. So, I mean, I say several years. That was like 5 years before this. Then we finally got the Game Boy version. 5 years doesn't seem like that long anymore. I mean, there's games that are still coming out that are like, it's the HD remake from 10 years ago. It's like, it looks the same. And this game, looks the same. But I always liked this game. Never beat it, never played it all the way through, but it was one of those NES games that you just kind of looked at and played, and it's like, okay, that's whimsical, sure. Tumble Pop, another fantastic game that I wish would have come out for the NES, so more people would have known about it. Comparing it to something like a Bubble Bobble, for instance. I mean, although it's not a single screen, you can scroll left and right a little bit, but it still has a bit of a mechanic where you have like your vacuum that you can suck up the enemies and then blast them back out for your, to use as a weapon. This game could have been a Kirby game, now that I think about it. You could have just used that, but before you could absorb the powers. If you absorb more than one enemy, it becomes a stronger shot. You can only keep them in your reservoir, your tank, for so long before they kind of, come out and attack you, basically. So make sure, like, once you suck them in, that you launch them pretty quickly there. Tumble Pop is pretty neat. It's a pretty neat game. I'm sure it came from the arcades or something. I'm not sure. I've only known this NES version, but is it on other platforms? You tell me in the comments. Great Greed from Namco would have made a fantastic RPG on the NES. I know I compare a lot of these Game Boy games to NES, but seriously, 93, the NES is like exiting already at this point. This would have been amazing. If this game would have come out, it would have been, I think, for sure, a hidden gem RPG for the NES. But you can still play it on the Game Boy, or play it on the Game Boy through the Super Nintendo adapter, the Super Game Boy or something. In true isekai fashion, you're in a modern world and you get sucked into this kind of fantasy world. Everyone has crazy fun names, which is kind of fun. That's why it's fun to see who you're going to talk to. They're like, oh, my name's Microwave, or oh, my name's a Calorie, or whatever. And then the fighting mechanic is just full-on RPG style. So, yeah, Great Greed. Might be worth checking out. Lethal Weapon, this is the port we didn't need, but we'll look at it for a second here. If you want to change characters, just go to the other side of the screen, the other guy will pop out. I always thought that was an interesting mechanic, but I know that wasn't English, but here we go. Raging Fighter. 2D style, just a 2D versus fighting game called Raging Fighter. Alright. Only has a couple of characters you can choose from in this. I don't know. It's something. Speedy Gonzales. Now, this is from Sunsoft. I mean, it could have been a better game, but we can look at it, at least for a little bit. So you're grabbing these little, I guess they're like cheese wheels. I mean, they look like crackers on screen, but they have the holes in them. Of course, it's Speedy Gonzales looking for cheese. That's what I'm guessing. And there is a Super Nintendo version of the Speedy Gonzales game, which makes more sense because you can go faster, but on the Game Boy, you don't want to go faster because then it starts blurring and get the ghosting effects and all that. It's a one-hit kill, so that's kind of difficult. Cool to see. I was a huge fan of Speedy Gonzales. I especially loved Slowpoke Rodriguez, but, cool that we have Speedy Gonzales represented on the Game Boy. Spider-Man 3. Now, I've always been a big fan of the Spider-Man games. Spider-Man, to me, like Batman, has more better games than not-so-great games. You know what I mean? The Spider-Man games are usually worth checking out a little bit. This one, it's not my favorite of the Spider-Man games on the Game Boy, but for what it is, it's still pretty neat. It's another Spider-Man game on the Game Boy. 93 may have been when a lot of people got their first Game Boy, because that's when Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening came out. This is one of those Legend of Zelda games, and I fall for this almost every time, that they call you whatever you change your name to, because you're not really Link, you're just like a descendant of Link or a relative of Link, so they call it, in these games, I always have to name myself Link, so I don't get confused. But either way you look at it, I put myself as Riggs in this one. One of my favorite Legend of Zelda games. It's such a Legend of Zelda side story. I don't need to. You can look up videos on how this game even came about as a fan project by employees of Nintendo that turned into an actual game. I wish more companies did this. So it's like, well, we're making these games because we're supposed to, but well, let's also make the games that we want to. And those are the games that win every time. Mortal Kombat. Man, you thought you got it wrong when your mom got you the Super Nintendo version over the Genesis version. Wait till you play the Game Boy version. First of all, I can't even play as Johnny Cage. And Johnny Cage was kind of my go-to guy in Mortal Kombat. You got Sub-Zero. I mean, you got the other characters, though, so it's not, not all for naught. But, Liu Kang's cool, and this is what Mortal Kombat looks like on the Game Boy. Not terrible. I mean, like, given the limitations, pretty fantastic. I'm okay just not playing it, though. Popeye 2, though. Popeye 2, I'm down. Fun little, little action game here for the Game Boy. This would have been cool. I love how you have this giant arm. They can actually upgrade your arm for Popeye. How do you need an arm upgrade for Popeye? Neat little runny platformy style game featuring Popeye. Gotta love it. The real Ghostbusters. Now this is the Ghostbusters based on the cartoon. So a completely different style of Ghostbusters game in this one. Again, based on the cartoon. So you have the cartoon character, but then the other things that are around you aren't really reminiscent of Ghostbusters. We'll talk about that in just a second, and I'm sure you already know the reason why. If you don't, I'll tell you. It's more of an action puzzle game where you have to collect the things to move through the door to move on to the next stage. This game, in the United States, real Ghostbusters. This game, in Japan, was a Mickey Mouse game. And the other Mickey Mouse games are kind of like this. I think this was like Mickey Mouse 4 for the Game Boy or something like that. But when it came out in the US, it was like, well, we can't just call it Mickey Mouse 4 when the other ones, sure, a couple of them maybe came out. But, let's just call it real Ghostbusters. And I'm cool with it. It's just maybe not the action, sarcastic, funny, comedy-style Ghostbusters game you're expecting. I think it's a pretty fun game, because I like puzzle games like this. There is that other Ghostbusters game that plays more like the Famicom version. That's the one to grab for sure. But this one also exists. Batman the Animated Series. Man, I'm the only guy in the world who's not the biggest fan of Batman. It's fine. The movies are fine. The games are fine. Just whatever. Batman the Animated Series was a series I loved. I watched that, man. It was every day after school, somewhere around then. I loved me, at the time, the Batman animated series. And the game is fantastic too. The game, if you like that kind of action-oriented style Batman action game, like this one, you can do the little triangle jump. You have your little grappling hook. You can just defeat the clowns. In this first stage. Kirby's Pinball Land. Well, I mean, sometimes you have to experiment with, like, well, we already have the name, we have the likeness, we have the IP, but it doesn't have to be a platformer every time. We can mix it up by using those same characters, but put it in a different style of game. And Video Pinball, can't go wrong. I do like Video Pinball. Not the only pinball game on the Game Boy, but when you mix it in with Kirby, well, why not? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 Radical Rescue. This is, without a doubt, my favorite Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game on the Game Boy. And it's also one of the best Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games out there, of all of them, in my opinion. It's Metroidvania style. You start as Michelangelo, that's all you have. You have to rescue your other guys, that's why it's called the Radical Rescue. But every turtle, it's not just like, oh, here it's the same turtle, they can do the same abilities, but then they have the different weapons. This one is they have different abilities, which will help you move through this kind of giant maze. Again, Metroidvania, so you can go wherever you want, but you can't access that yet until you unlock a certain turtle who has the ability to get you to where you need to go. There's a lot of fun to be had with this game. And I love the fact that this game exists. This is, again, my favorite one. This game also does exist on that Turtles collection that came out a couple years ago, whatever that was. So worth checking out, worth looking at. Turtles 3 for the Game Boy. It's the best one for sure. Mega Man 4, finally get that as well from Capcom. I love this menu selection screen. I love this robot selection screen. And then other than that, it's just Mega Man 4. There you go. I mean, it's not like the NES version of Mega Man 4. The Game Boy versions are still kind of their own versions, but inspired by the NES versions. So Mega Man 4 for the Game Boy. Boy, I'm sucking this time. I'm capturing my own footage. Yeah, sure, I could have done the Stranger Things thing and just stolen footage from the YouTube, but no, I'll capture my own footage, even if it means sucking. Well, there you go. I've covered all of the previous years for Game Boy leading up to this point, and we still have a couple of more years for Game Boy, and then on into Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance. And this style, this format of video, also have done it for NES, Genesis, Super Nintendo. A lot to catch up on if you're new to the channel.